Oh, hey, I see you now, Dr. Miller. There you go.
Awesome.
All right. So, welcome. Today we are going to do a employer onboarding for teacher apprenticeship for our pilot program. This program is something that's been done in partnership with University of West Alabama, the State Department of Education, and my office, the Alabama Office of Apprenticeship. I'm Josh Laney, the director of the Office of Apprenticeship. The impetus for this program came, well, one, just from the extreme demand for teachers in the state, and Governor Ivey gave us marching orders to go and try to develop a process to use apprenticeship so that we could create a pathway for more people to be able to become teachers. So that's exactly what we're working on. I've got a PowerPoint that I'm going to share and quite a few documents. We're going to go through a lot of material today. So, buckle up, but also we'll have time at the end to take some questions if I go too fast or if I'm unclear on anything. And we are recording this, and it will be housed online on the teacher apprentice landing page that I'll show you. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen, and we will start with this little PowerPoint right here. Dr. Miller, can you see that PowerPoint slide? Okay. All right, so good. All right, so just a real quick overview of the 5 components of a registered apprenticeship program. I always like to start with this in case somebody's not familiar with the difference in a registered apprenticeship versus other types of training programs. Every registered apprenticeship will have all 5 of these components. If it doesn't have all 5 of these things, it's not an apprenticeship, no matter what anybody calls it. So the first thing is employer involvement, and this apprenticeship program is no different. This means that we do this in response to employer demand. So the employers, of course, being the local school systems and the schools in our state who definitely have a demand and need teachers, they are the drivers for this work. And as far as the involvement, we did bring on right at the outset representatives from CLAS, Council for Leaders in Alabama Schools, and also SA, the State Superintendent's Association, to serve as the employer voice as we started to flesh out what a teacher apprenticeship would look like in the state. So some of these points as we go through today and we talk about what's included and what's not included and who can participate and so on, some of those were informed by that group, and we really appreciate the work that they did, being our initial competency development work group. So employer involvement drives the process. The second component of a registered apprenticeship program is structured on-the-job learning. Every apprenticeship, of course, includes on-the-job learning. That's really kind of the secret sauce, is getting people into the workplace and doing the work in real life under the supervision of a mentor so that they can learn exactly what it takes to be qualified and be proficient in that particular occupation. So this on-the-job learning is what you have to be able to do. And of course, if you're doing it, then that is evaluated by the employer. So the on-the-job learning component, since we're talking about employer aspect today, that is a big component of the responsibilities of the employer, is to supervise and monitor and provide that on-the-job learning, keep up with where the apprentice is in their actual capacity and ability to do the work. So we talked about, well, if that's what you have to be able to do on the job, that's the OJL, the on-the-job learning, then the related instruction is the third component. That's what you have to know to be able to do those things. So the other side of the apprenticeship training program, besides the stuff you learn on the job, is what you learn in the classroom. And so in this case, University of West Alabama is serving as the sponsor. So they're the organizing body for this, but they are also the related instruction provider. So they're going to make sure that the coursework is in line with what a person needs to know to be proficient in this task, and also that it meets, in this case, certification requirements and all of that, just like they typically do in their job as an education prep provider in the state. Fourth component of a registered apprenticeship program is rewards for skills gains. This means that as a person becomes more competent and more skilled, they are more valuable to their employer, and that brings them more money. They get raises. So this is one of the key components of a registered apprenticeship. And this is one of the places where it's different than some of the traditional education models where we train teachers. Oftentimes a person goes through a regular teacher apprenticeship or teacher internship program, and they have to go to work for a semester, basically work full semester, full time, with no pay. That's fine if you are a young adult or you've got a family that can support you doing that or whatever. But if you're a working adult and you've got to put bread on the table and pay the power bill, sometimes that can be a problem. So this apprenticeship program is, like others, designed to support working adults and really to broaden the aperture of who can take advantage of the benefits of registered apprenticeship training model. The fifth component of every registered apprenticeship is a national occupational credential. Every registered apprenticeship is recognized in all 50 states and territories because it is federally registered. That's what that means. My office, the Alabama Office of Apprenticeship, oversees the quality standards and the registration process. And that means that it's fully portable. That certificate that you earn from my office is called a Journey Workers Credential or Journey Worker Certificate. That is not the same as a teacher license in this case. We are talking specifically about teachers, so you still may have to get individual state licensure, and this program will actually end in 2 credentials. So it gets the Journey Worker Certificate from my office, well, 3 if you think about it, Journey Worker Certificate from my office, your degree from UWA, and your teacher certificate from the State Department of Education. So you'll be a well-credentialed, highly qualified individual when you're done with this training program. So a little bit about the structure of how we implement that. The first layer of this organization is the registration agency. That's me, the Alabama Office of Apprenticeship. We are responsible for the promotion, expansion, oversight, and quality control of registered apprenticeship throughout the state. We also support other forms of work-based learning and help to promote everything from internships to co-ops, everything else. But in this case, we are the registration agency. Under that body is the sponsor. So for the registered apprenticeship program, you got to have somebody who is coordinating those activities. University of West Alabama is acting as our sponsor. So as we're going through today, and I say sponsor's responsibility versus employer's responsibility, sponsor is the university and the employer is the next body. That is the local education agency. So in every registered apprenticeship, it's employer driven, but they're the ones that are joining this apprenticeship program. And we'll look at what that means here in a minute. But they are the ones that are actually hiring the person, providing the OJL, doing the on-the-job learning assessments, all of that. And then you've got the RTI provider. Now, this is a special case, well, not particularly special, but one of the special cases where our education provider is also the sponsor. So West Alabama has a dual role here. They are coordinating this for multiple employers to participate in, but they are also providing the related technical instruction, which we'll look at the components of what that means for them to do in a moment. And then lastly, you've got the apprentice. Of course, this is the tip of the spear, and this is the product of all of this work, where the apprentice is given the opportunity to kind of look back upstream to all of these organizations. They should be getting supported by the registration agency, the sponsor, the employer, and the RTI provider, everybody moving them towards the apprentice being successful and completing this training, going on to be the world's greatest teacher. So what do those different groups do? Just a little dive into the roles in the apprenticeship. First, for the sponsor, well, the sponsor is going to ensure that the employer and the related instruction provider are doing what they're supposed to do. They maintain the records. They ensure periodic evaluations of the apprentices. They will evaluate prior credit, which, remember, in this case, the sponsor and the instruction provider are the same entity. So they'll evaluate prior credit, meaning looking at transcripts and that kind of thing to see if a person has some credit coming into the program. They'll also assign the EEO responsibilities. So I want to point out here, there'll be places in these documents we're going to look at where it says that the sponsor must ensure whatever it is. It doesn't mean that the sponsor has to do those things. It means that they've either got to do them themselves or make sure they're getting done. So, for example, anti-harassment training, which we'll hit on multiple times. Everybody participating in a registered apprenticeship has to be trained in anti-harassment. Well, it's the sponsor's responsibility to make sure that's getting done. They can either provide training themselves or they can get attestations and documents from the employer that the employer's doing it. So that's what we mean when they're assigning EEO responsibilities. They also serve as one of the bodies who can accept complaints. So if an apprentice has a complaint, we'll talk about that process. The sponsor can try to come in and maybe act as an intermediary if the apprentice says, hey, I'm not getting the right kind of training here at my school, or my journey worker is just not supporting me, or whatever. Always apprentices will always be counseled to follow their chain of command, but there are going to be certain times where you need a third party that could kind of come in and help to facilitate that discussion. So the sponsor can do some of that. And then, of course, the sponsor is taking on all the responsibilities of reporting to my office. So that keeps up with the paperwork for who's registered, who's completed, who's a journey worker, who's an apprentice, which employers are participating. And really that's a big bonus for the employers because it consolidates a lot of the overhead administrative activities. Whereas if you had every individual employer serving as their own sponsor, you'd be doing a lot of duplicative work. So you really do get a benefit out of having a group sponsor like the University of West Alabama. The middle role there is the related instruction provider. Again, in this case, this is the university. They are providing the related instruction, which they normally do. They are provided related instruction related to safety, which they normally do. But this is specifically called out in apprenticeship. Safety is always a very high priority. The related instruction also tracking and reporting, so keeping up with transcripts and things, which is a normal role and responsibility for them. And then maintaining qualified instructors to make sure the professors and all who are providing that related instruction are qualified and up to par. And then lastly, you got the employer. Excuse me. The employer is providing the on-the-job learning. They're making sure that the on-the-job learning is done in a safe environment, free of harassment. They're providing the mentors. This is a good place to point out, at least for the first time, probably of many, a mentor and a journey worker are the same thing, right? So this is an interchangeable term. The employer identifies the journey worker, aka mentor. In education language, a lot of times, we call that a mentor. In an apprentice language, we call it a journey worker. We're going to use the term journey worker because we do want to distinguish. These are a special batch of mentors. This is not necessarily the same as other people because these journey workers they're going to get a stipend, for example, and there's some required training for them. So journey workers, mentors, assignment them and finding the qualified people, that's a responsibility of the employer. Maintaining the ratio. In this particular apprenticeship program, the ratio is 1-to-1, meaning you got one apprentice assigned to one journey worker, so you can't put 2 or 3 apprentice teachers in the classroom under one journey worker, and it's the employer's responsibility to make sure that that's always the case. They're, of course, keeping up with the wages since the employer is the one paying the bill, and they are tracking the on-the-job training and reporting. So that on-the-job training tracking will show you towards the end. We've got some software that is at no cost to you, makes it super easy to use, and you can keep up with that on-the-job learning. So all of these roles and responsibilities are spelled out in a long series of documents that we're about to go through. These documents start with the standards. The standards is the most broad, overarching document that establishes the University of West Alabama as an organization that can organize apprenticeships. They can offer apprenticeships in whatever occupations they have the capability to do. So whether it be nursing or teaching or both, or nursing or teaching or machining, they can do as many as they want to do, but the standards commit them to certain activities, and we'll see those activities in a minute. Then under the standards, you have an Appendix A, which is also called a work process, and I'll show you the one for this in a moment. That defines the training outline for a certain occupation. So you got one set of standards, and then you might have however many occupations that school or that university is sponsoring. So right now, UWA is already set up for high school teachers. They have got an App A work process defined for high school teachers. I anticipate within the week, they will have the one done for elementary teachers. So each of those would get a different Appendix A, a different work process, because the courses are materially different from one to the other, whether you're been a high school teacher or an elementary, or a nurse or whatever. So I point out that there are multiple Appendix A's because then you go to the next document that's called an Appendix D or an Employer Acceptance Agreement. So let's say for a minute that I am Laney School System and I want to have high school teachers from the University of West Alabama Apprenticeship Program. I will sign an Employer Acceptance Agreement that says, hey, I've looked at the training outline you developed for high school teachers, and I agree with that, and I want to sign on to that. I'll do that with my Employer Acceptance Agreement, App D. But if I also want to join on to your nurse program, or I also want to join on to your elementary program, I need to do an Employer Acceptance Agreement for each one of those because the training outline is different. The wages might be different, and they're not for high school and elementary, but depending on what the particular occupation is, each occupation, the employer chooses to sign, yep, I've evaluated high school, I want to sign on to that one. Yep, I've evaluated elementary, I want to sign on to that one. And then lastly, you've got an Appendix B. It's very commonly called a 671. It's what everybody calls it. It's Form 671. That's the apprenticeship agreement. So that's when we get all the way to the end of this chain, the apprentice looks at this and says, hey, I see what the sponsor has promised to do. I see what the work process is that tells me what I've got to do coursework wise and on the job. I see what my employer has committed to do from a supervision and pay and standards position, and I agree to adhere to all of those standards. So the apprentice signs the 671 at the end, and they have evaluated all of these documents. All right, so those documents, we're about to go through a pretty good list of them here. So don't be discouraged when you see this long list of documents we're going to go through. But I really want you to understand the overall process that we're working on. So just quickly, this is the standards document that was signed for the University of West Alabama. This was done way back in May of 2020. You're thinking, well, we hadn't been doing teacher apprenticeship since then. No, but they were doing nursing. They were doing, I don't know what else they got, but they got multiple occupations with West Alabama. So what are they committing to do? Well, right here on the first page of this, it says sponsors shall. And I'm not going to read every one of these to you, but I want to highlight a few components of it. The first thing the sponsor shall do is ensure adequate and safe equipment facilities. So this does not convey a responsibility for the sponsor to come and do some kind of audits on your campus or anything like that. Remember, I said ensure means that they either have to do it themselves or be assured that it is getting done by the employer. So they can be assured that the employer is providing adequate, safe equipment facilities. They're keeping the apprentices safe unless they hear otherwise, and then they need to go and check on that. If some apprentice says, hey, they're making me teach classes on the roof, then the sponsor needs to go and look into that. And this is a good place to mention, well, what if the employer doesn't comply with something that's in all these documents we're about to look at? Well, what happens then? Really, the only enforcement activity that can take place is the sponsor, UWA, could say, you know what, employer, if you can't provide a safe working environment for our apprentices, we just can't send you any more apprentices, so you won't be able to be part of our program. There's no fines or penalties or anything like that associated with it. You just, if you can't, don't want to or can't follow the guidelines that are laid out here, then you just don't participate in this program. So the second bullet here is make sure that they're qualified training personnel. So that's both on the job and in the classroom. We'll talk about the exact qualifications for teacher mentors and journey workers in a minute. Make sure everybody's got a 671. These are just kind of record keeping things. Make sure that the apprentice agreements are submitted to my office within 45 days. A couple of places in here, you'll see this 45-day notice. I'm pointing this out because this is critical for employers and sponsors to be communicating on an ongoing basis. As an employer, if you've got an apprentice in your building that quits or stops showing up, or you terminate them, or they are failing their classes or whatever, the sponsor won't know that unless you tell them. So it is incumbent upon the sponsor and the employer to have good, clear, ongoing communication, because when, let's just say, for example, that the apprentice quit or moved or whatever, the sponsor needs to be notified, because the sponsor has an obligation to notify my office within 45 days of that happening. So I just want to point that out. You need to have good, clear, ongoing communication. And some of that comes down to being as simple as who you name as the point of contact in the documents, which we'll go through here in a moment. So 45 days, all of that, pretty standard. The next one here says make available a copy of the standards and any of the other rules and stuff to the apprentices. So right now on the teacher apprenticeship landing page that we have built, we have these standards right here, the ones we're looking at. There they are. We've got the work process right there, and we'll add the one for elementary when it gets done. We've got employer acceptance agreement. We got the application. Everything is right there, but it is a responsibility of the sponsor and the employer to make sure that the apprentice knows where to find them and has reviewed them. The worst thing that can happen is you have somebody sign up for a program and they don't really know what they're signing up for. And as I've said before, the gap between expectations and reality is called disappointment. So we need to make sure that they're signed up, they understand what they're committing to and what they're signed up for. And then there are some minimum qualifications. This is a very standard minimum qualification for physical requirements. Just says the person has to be able to do the job safely within reasonable accommodations. So nothing special about that minimum requirement. And then the rest of this is pretty broad, because you're going to get down to the App A, and that ratio and all that will be defined per job. here are some critical parts. The EEO pledge. I'm going to blow this up just a little bit so you can see that easier. The EEO pledge, the university is committing that they will not discriminate against all these different subgroups here. This is a different EEO pledge. A lot of employers may have non-discrimination clauses, for other types of activities they participate in, particularly thinking about local school systems that participate in Perkins. You've got non-discrimination stuff you have to put out for your Perkins money, for example. But this is a unique one for apprenticeship. So you will have to use this apprenticeship statement when you are publishing documents related to the apprenticeship. I'll show you that later on down the line. So the employer is committing they're going to do this, and then the sponsor is committing they're going to do this, and every employer that joins under them is also agreeing to follow this non-discrimination clause. The affirmative action plan is a requirement of the university as the sponsor, not of every individual employer. I hesitated to even bring up the affirmative action plan because I know that some school system lawyers are going to panic, or some school board is going to think, oh no, what do we have to do now? This is a responsibility of the sponsor. They'll do one affirmative action plan for their entire program. It does not entail quotas. They're not going to tell you how you have to hire. This is not a 1970s version of an old school affirmative action program. This is something that my office will work with UWA to take care of. And as an employer, you may not ever even know that it's getting done. We will talk about the selection procedures in the next document. Complaint procedures in this document is an overall complaint procedure, a person that an apprentice could complain to. We will always, again, counsel that apprentice to follow their chain of command, but there may be times where they need to go to the next level in that chain. So we want to know this is who you can contact at the university to discuss that. For general complaints, you can also contact my project manager at the office. So there's their contact information. And then here's the overall general information for us. You also have, as the apprentice, the option for complaints regarding discrimination. I've skipped that. Here we go. Complaints regarding discrimination. And we'll show you, there's a poster that I'll show you at the end. An apprentice has the right, and this is one of the few exceptional rights that an apprentice gets above and beyond any other employee. The apprentice has the right to come straight to my office with a complaint about a discrimination complaint. If they think they've got some kind of a discrimination complaint, they can come straight to my office. So if they do, we will follow federal EEO guidelines for addressing that complaint. And you can see some of the general stuff here. A complaint must be filed within 300 days and yada, yada, yada. But that is one of the few places where they, people think, well, if they're an apprentice, can I still fire them? Yes, you treat them just like you treat any other employee, because an apprentice is an employee first. With this one exception, if they have an EEO complaint, they basically now have an additional body that they can bring that complaint to. So that sets up UWA as a sponsor. And then let's dive specifically into what we call the App A, or the work process. So you can see right there on the cover page, it's called Appendix A work process. Now, this particular one is special for University of West Alabama for secondary teachers, except special ed and career tech. All right, now they are working on, we've already said, and we'll have soon another one for elementary. If you want to do this one and the other one, employers, you have to sign 2 employer acceptance agreements. So a few characteristics of this work process: it is competency based. So that means we're tracking the individual competencies, not how long the person has been doing the job. There are 96 competencies, and it says not less than 1,000 hours of instruction. That's because each apprentice may have a little bit different number of hours of instruction. 1-to-1 ratio of apprentice to journey workers. The base wage progression is spelled out here. So in year 1, every employer who agrees to participate has to be paying at least these minimums. It's currently set up as 65% of the entry-level teacher. You notice there's no dollar amount over here. We did that so that if the state gives a raise next year for teachers on the base pay scale, we don't have to go back and redo the documents every time. It's 65% of whatever the base teacher rate is in year 1. And then in year 2, it's 85%. And then, of course, in year 3, once they've completed the apprenticeship program, they go to a regular teacher pay scale, 100% of teacher pay. There's no dollar amounts here, and I'll show you why in the next document. In the probationary period, sometimes employers have a question about this. Does this mean that they're a probationary employee for 6 months? This is unrelated to their employment status. This is probationary as an apprentice. So let's just say, hypothetically, you had somebody who was working as a parapro or a secretary, and they got into the apprenticeship program. They applied, they got in, they're doing fine. But you get 3 or 4 months in and realize, I can't handle the coursework. I can't keep up with the coursework and work full time, or I don't like kids, whatever it is. I want to get out of the teacher apprenticeship program. Within that first 6 months, they can be removed from the teacher apprenticeship program, and it doesn't count against UWA's completion rate for apprentices. Now, my office doesn't have a minimum that they have to hit, but we do track completion rates. So this is just, if somebody tries it and it's not working out, they can come out in that early stage without it counting against their completion rate. The minimum qualifications here, very basic. First, you got to be 18 years of age to participate in this program. The real qualifications to be noted for this occupation are here in the education requirement. So they do have to be an employee, and I'll show you that in another place. But the education requirement says they've got to have sufficient, transferable, acceptable college credit hours to be within 2 academic years of completing their bachelor's degree in the teacher ed program. Nobody will be able to tell you that as an employer or as an apprentice applicant except the university. So when we get to the process of applying later, we're going to talk about, you need to send your transcript. The applicant needs to send their transcript for evaluation so that Dr. Miller and her team at the university can go, you haven't even had English 101, right? We got some basics we got to get done here first. Or yes, you're very close. You're within the right time frame to be able to complete and move you forward in the process. And you've also got to have confirmed eligibility to get into the teacher ed program. So not just that you have the credits, but you may have a GPA requirement, and we talk about that towards the end if there is one. But whatever the requirements are for getting into UWA's teacher ed program, you've got to be able to meet those requirements too. Again, the physical part is just the standard. You got to be able to do the thing with or without reasonable accommodation safely. There is some additional requirement here for clearance of a background check. You got to have citizenship. These are the things required by the State Department of Ed so that you can get a teacher apprentice license and then eventually get a full Class B teaching certificate. So that's the header part there. And then the selection procedures, I'm intentionally skipping this first part of the selection procedures because that's not what you're going to use as an employer in this program. You are going to use direct entry. The reason it's direct entry, what that means is you're not accepting applications to the apprenticeship program for people from off the street. You're only accepting applications for people that are already your employees. Now, I'll probably say this again later, but I want to make sure I don't forget. We originally were talking a lot about parapros and teacher's aides, and that is still our primary target audience. But the question came up, what if I've got a bookkeeper or a secretary or somebody like that, this other support role that wants to be a teacher and they otherwise qualify, can they apply? Yes, they can. So it doesn't have to be a parapro or teacher's aide. It might be your school secretary that has been wanting to become a teacher all along, and they could also apply. So this is really kind of just a quick outline of the application process. The RTI provider will evaluate the applicant's college transcript and see if they're within the right time frame. The employer will evaluate the employee's skills and see, yep, I'm going to put them in. I think this is somebody I want to invest in. The sponsor will evaluate the application and make sure that they meet all the minimum requirements. So that is the work process. Now, if you keep going down, then you get into the very specifics. This is something you want to make sure your apprentices or your apprentice applicants have looked at. If they don't look at any other document in the whole thing, this is the document you want to make sure that the applicants have looked at. The first section under this part of the work process is the competencies. So as educators, you'll all see apprentice will be able to, that's how we write our competencies, apprentice will be able to adapt to new and different changing requirements with flexibility, right? So these are the things a person has to be able to do on the job. If it's in this list, it is evaluated by the employer. Now that can be the journey worker, It could be the superintendent. It could be the principal of the school, somebody who is qualified at the employer level to observe these things. The primary responsibility for observing these is the daily journey worker, the journey worker who's in the classroom daily with that apprentice. You'll note here we've got 3 levels of checkoff. Field training essentially means that they've observed it being done. It's been explained to them. They've watched the master teacher do this thing. Demonstrates fundamentals means they've done it with guidance. They understand fundamentally how to do that task. They can do it with some supervision. And then proficient in task means they're good to go. They've been completely checked off. Nobody except the journey worker at the employer can do this checkoff sheet. And I keep emphasizing that because this is a little different. You've got to remember these people are employees first, not students first. So this is more like sending an employee to the college for professional development as opposed to the college sending you students to try to get some work experience for. That's the mental flip you've got to make to organize these activities. So on-the-job learning evaluated by the employer. There are, you'll see 96 competencies here. And then you get down to the related instruction section. So these are the courses that will be spelled out for each of the different specialty types. Right here on this definitions page, you've got some important acronyms: CBA, competency-based assessment; VAS, virtual asynchronous. I'm not going to read them all to you. CE, clinical experience. I point that out because as you go down, you see the very first one is UWA General Science. So these are the classes, and this is a generic course outline for a person coming in that has met all of the other prereqs. They will be evaluated when they apply to see if they have met their basic, I've had my English, I've had my math, I've had my foundational stuff, and then if I can start taking these classes. But in this list, so this list may actually wind up being a little different for every apprentice. I anticipate it probably will. In this list, they added this delivery column. So AS means that it is asynchronous. And then you've got CBE is competency-based. You've got, what is OE? I forgot what that one is. What is OE? I think that's probably supposed to be CE, clinical experience. So we'll touch that up. But that gives the apprentice the idea, and you can see as you progress, like that one's for general science, then this one is for biology, and there's a different page for math, and so on and so forth. History, general social studies, and then there'll be another one for elementary. So this gives the apprentice an idea by looking at this and going, all right, these are all the classes that I would need to complete. This is a generalized course outline of when I would be expected to complete them. And here's how the school is offering those. It's competency-based, or it's asynchronous, or if it said FF, which none of these do, that'd be face-to-face. Because a person needs to know what they're signing up for. Am I going to need to make my way over to the college to take these classes? And the answer here is no. All right, so that's the work process. That's the App A. After you as an employer have evaluated this and you say, yes, I want to use that training outline to train my apprentices to become teachers of math or science or English or whatever, you're going to demonstrate that you want to do that by signing an employer acceptance agreement. That's an App D. So you can get that only from Dr. Miller. We didn't put that available online because I didn't want, teachers or somebody to go get it and we got, mass confusion. So if you're an employer and you have not already done this, or you need to do this for elementary when it becomes available, you will sign one of these employer acceptance agreements to agree to what's in the standards and agree to what's in that App A that we just looked at, the work process. So what are you committing to do? You are committing to follow the stuff that was in those 2 documents. You're going to follow the training outline as it was laid out. You're going to comply with the EEO clause as it was spelled out. On the job, the apprentice is guaranteed assignment to a skilled and competent journey worker, and that the work assigned to the apprentice will be rotated to ensure training. So what does that mean? Well, one, the skilled and competent journey worker, that's the qualifications for a journey worker are the same as the qualifications for somebody who was going to supervise interns. So it's master's degree and whatever the level of years of experience, same qualifications that you would have had before. Those are defined in the CFR. in the Alabama Administrative Code, and they're highlighted on the application page. So the employer is saying, I'll make sure I get them a journey worker that meets the requirements. Oh, and by the way, if I've got somebody who wants to be a science teacher, I can't stick them in a math teacher's class. They've got to be qualified to train that person in the thing that they're studying to be. Also, that they are going to be, this says, rotated to ensure the training in all phases. So let's jump back to the App A for just a second. What does that mean? Well, if they are facilitating inquiry-based activities and tasks, that's great, but that can't be the only thing they ever do. So as an employer and as a journey worker, the responsibilities are to make sure that you're keeping up with, yes, they've done all these, but you know what, Josh, you've done down through 78, but you hadn't touched, I don't know, number 83. We've got to get you some work with learners that are struggling. So let's have you do some small group pullouts or whatever that looks like. That's the responsibility of the employer to make sure the apprentice is getting a broad set of skills. So that's one thing you're committing to there as an employer. And then the next part here just says that you'll abide by the policies of the AOA, including but not limited to living wage requirement, which in this case, we're way past that. It's not a problem. But my office does have a requirement that a person has to be making at least $15 an hour by the end of 1 year of training. And also there's a last dollar scholarship requirement, which does apply here, which means the apprentice does not pay the bill for the cost of the training. Now you're going to get some state incentive funds. We'll talk about those later. But if that doesn't cover it, the employer is accepting the responsibility to cover the cost of the training. Sometimes questions come up about, well, how many times do I have to pay for them to take that class if they fail it? One. That's a common question. If you have an apprentice that takes a class and they don't pass it or don't make the B or whatever they're required to have to continue in the training program at the college, then if they have to take it again, that could be on their dime, not on the employers. So the form's got to be signed, and it goes back to UWA once it's signed. This employer information right here, I mean, pretty obvious, name, all that. EIN, please don't leave that blank. We do need your employer identification number, so fill that out. As far as the contact, this does not need to be the superintendent. I guess it could be if it's a small school system or the superintendent just wants to be intricately involved in this particular program, but this really needs to be the day-to-day person that if we've got a question or an apprentice has a question or we need something signed or whatever, that's who we're going to reach out to. And for that matter, that's who the apprentice would reach out to if they've got a question about it. So put a primary contact here who, A, knows what's going on. Don't assign this to somebody and let it be a surprise to them, but also make it somebody who's got the time and the right level within the school system to be able to work on that. There's a spot here for you to fill out the total number of journey workers. You do not have to go do some kind of big study to figure out how many qualified journey workers you have in the school system. Ballpark it. How many high school teachers do you think you have with a master's degree? Just general number here is all we're looking for. The only time this would ever really matter is if you wound up with more apprentices than you had journey workers, and I don't think we're in any danger of that anytime soon. It does specify that apprentices are not paid for hours spent attending related instruction classes. So if there's a weekend class or if they have a night class or something like that, the employer is not committed to pay them their hourly wage, or part of their wages during that time. Again, we've reiterated the minimum qualifications are spelled out in the App A, still that 18, and then those other requirements that we looked at. Now we get to the progressive wage schedule. In the work process, remember it had percentages but no dollar amounts. In this document, it's got actual dollar amounts. The difference here is this is being signed by each individual employer. So school system A may pay exactly on the base, the regular teacher pay scale, whatever it is, it comes from State Department, the base teacher pay scale. That's how they calculate their wages. That's pretty much what's pre-populated here. But school system B might say, well, we always pay a 5% premium on top of the state minimums. That's part of our recruiting efforts. That is totally acceptable. The school system can pay whatever they want as long as they at least hit these minimums, the 65 and 85% minimums. A word of caution right here, and I'm going to say this about 3 different ways. Employers, you may not engage in wage conversations with each other. It's a violation of federal law. It's an antitrust activity and it's anti-competitive behavior. So what that means is employer can have a conversation with the sponsor about, hey, we're going to pay exactly these minimums as defined in the document, or hey, we're going to pay a 5% bonus, whatever it is that we're going to pay. Employer and sponsor, good conversation. Employer and the Office of Apprenticeship, good conversation. Employer and the apprentice, good conversation. Employer and employer, breaking the law. Do not have that conversation. And the reason they make such a big deal about this in apprenticeship world is if you've got 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 employers that are all hiring the same occupation in a region, they could easily collude to suppress wages. And that is, like I said, against the law. It's enforced by the Department of Justice, not the Department of Labor, and they are not playing around with it. So you can talk in general terms about your recruiting activities and all of that with each other. We encourage you to do that. And in fact, once this is up and running, we will have some regularly scheduled meetings for employers to connect with each other about what's working and what's not. Just if you hear conversations between employers starting about, hey, what are you going to pay? Are you going to pay a supplement? Are you going to go above the minimum? Don't have that conversation. All right. And then the last part of that document is the signature. In this case, we would like to have the signature of the superintendent at the bottom of this to make sure that you've got buy-in from the most senior level in your district. So signature of superintendent, all fine and good. Point of contact doesn't really need to be the super. That needs to be somebody who's going to deal with this on a daily basis. All right. So let's say that you as an employer have done this and you've sent it back to Dr. Miller. She reviews it. She signs it. Yep. Sponsor signs it right there. She's going to send it to me. When she sends it to me, I'm going to send you a thank you letter. Hey, congratulations. You have now joined the apprenticeship under the University of West Alabama sponsorship. Along with that thank you note, you will get this document. Some of you have already gotten it and have already seen it and filled it out. This is the pre-qualification document for the funding that is unique to this particular apprenticeship program. So as you know, $2.4 million was allocated by the legislature to support teacher apprenticeship, and this money will be used to offset, let me say it again, offset the cost of the teacher apprenticeship for local education agencies. This is not intended to completely 100% cover the cost. Every employer is committing, remember, right here, every employer is committing that they will serve as the last dollar scholarship for this program. So the way this funding is going to work, if you will read through these qualifications in a minute, once you qualify and you've got apprentices, you'll receive $40,000 for the first year to help offset the cost of your apprentices. You can use that for apprentice wages. You can use that if to pay the bill for the classes at the university. You can use that to pay the journey worker stipend. When you get allocated the funds, you'll be given a budget to spell it out. It's got to be spent in support of this teacher apprenticeship program, but if you want to pay the journey worker stipend out of local funds and use this to pay for college classes, that's up to you. But it's got to be spent to support this. So in order to qualify for this, I'm sure in your local school systems, there's probably a process where anybody who wants to send you a bill in the future has to get on the list to become a vendor, right? They've got to get added to your system. Well, that's one of the steps that we have to do as well. And that will be done through AIDT, Alabama Industrial Development Training. Don't worry about it. There won't be a quiz on that. They're our fiscal agent. They're the ones that hold this money. And we will walk you through. I've got a person, Amy Brown, who will walk you through the process of getting added as a vendor. To get pre-qualified for the funding, the local school system has to commit to these we say attestations here. The first is that I understand that the completion of this is not a guarantee that I'm going to get money, right? So the money is only available if the legislature reallocates it. So we know we've got money for year one. We've got confidence that we'll have money for year two, but it's always at the discretion of the legislature. The second is that the final determination of an apprentice's eligibility, nobody is an apprentice until they're completely registered. So they've got to go all the way through this process. Don't think that because you fill this out, you're guaranteed the $40,000 payment for year one. The third thing says, if you do accept these funds from our office to incentivize this program, you guarantee that you're going to pay the journey worker, that's the mentor. You're going to give them a stipend of $3,500 for year one and $2,500 for year two. That you can pay them in one lump sum. You can spread it out over the course of the school year. it doesn't matter to us, but you've got to pay them this stipend in order to pay them for the additional work that they're going to be expected to do. Then you understand that the funds are meant to offset. And I already said this is an offset. There's no such thing as free. So a registered apprenticeship is an investment by an employer. If you use the $40,000 and you find that there's still a couple of $1,000s of expenses or whatever, then you'll have to cover those out of local funds. This is not something where you can come back to my office and say, oh, we need more money. This isn't enough. You need to go through at the front end of this and do a calculation and say, all right, stipend is going to cost me this much in year one, and wages for the apprentice are going to cost me this much in year one, and classes for the apprentice, you can talk to the college and get a good strong estimate for the classes of the apprentice or what the cost of that's going to be. And you ought to be able to pretty easily come up with an estimate to know how much above or below that 40,000 you're going to come out in year one. And then do the same process for year two. Remember, in year two, you get to use an FTE for that apprentice. All right, so the LEA is committing that journey workers will participate in training provided by the AOA. So we will do, Meredith Smith is my assistant director and is on the call here. We will coordinate a training. It's typically done as 2 half-day virtual trainings. So we will coordinate that during this summer. I do understand that I was a K-12 person. I know people are not on contract, people are on vacation, all that. So we will do everything in our power to make sure that we offer some either multiple sessions or some asynchronous opportunities to complete that training. But every journey worker must complete that training in order to be the journey worker and in order to check off on the job learning and in order to receive their stipend. So that's one of the reasons they're getting a stipend. And then the last thing here is to say that the school system has done a preliminary review, and I at least have a general idea that there are some apprentices in my, some employees in my school system who could qualify to be apprentices. You're not guaranteeing it, but you've at least done a little survey and said, yeah, I've got some people out there that make good candidates for this. You tell us if you want 1 or 2. Everybody's pretty much picking 2. Type the name of superintendent, signed by the superintendent. So when you've got that, all the instructions here, submit this form completed to Amy Brown. You just click and email it right to Amy. So you're going to complete that. That gets you on the list, pre-qualified for the state funding. Now, once you're pre-qualified, once apprentices applications start to come in, all that means is we're going to say, hey, Meredith, we see that you are number 5 on the list. You're pre-qualified for state funding. Do you have any apprentices? If you don't have any apprentices, then we're going to roll that funding down to number 6 on the list. So it doesn't lock the money in. It doesn't tie it up for you, but it puts you in sequence. It puts you in line. All of that to say, the sooner you fill this out, the better off you're going to be. If you are past the amount of money when you submit this, if we have got more obligations than we have, than we have dollars, then we'll let you know, hey, you are number 41. So we're putting you on a wait list, and we'll let you know if funding rolls down to you. So that's the pre-qualification. After that comes the application. All right. So real quick recap. We've got the standards. That was the thing that set up the university as the sponsor. We got the work process. That is also called the App-A. That's the thing that outlines the details of the training. You've got the employer acceptance agreement. That's what the employer has signed. It says, yes, I'll follow these, and here's what I'm going to pay, and here's my specific stipulations. Now we get over to the important part, where we're looking for apprentices. So this application will be made available from the university as the sponsor. They'll be the ones you get this application from in the form of a fillable PDF, and it comes in phases. So this application is done in parts. The first part, A here, is done by the apprentice. Very basic stuff. Fill out your race, gender, ethnicity, birthday, all of that, general demographic information. Social Security number is not something that you have to be an apprentice, but it is something you have to apply for a license with the State Department. So if an apprentice wanted to leave this blank until later in the process, so that as this document went through the process, their social wasn't, floating around on that, you could wait and fill that out last. But before it goes to the State Department, it's got to have that Social Security number in there. This misnumbered section, I just realized right here, number 7 should be number 8, is about pre-apprenticeship. We don't have any pre-apprenticeships for teachers right now, so everybody will mark no on that. Number 8 should be number 9, voluntary disclosure of disability. This is critically important. everybody as an applicant for or participant in a registered apprenticeship program has to be given the opportunity to disclose if they have a disability. This is for statistical purposes only. It does not mean that the employer should say, hey, I see that you disclosed a disability. Let's talk about that. Tell me all about it. That is not the purpose of this. If they request accommodations, that's done completely separate from this. This is a document that we have to have for participation in an apprenticeship program, just so we can keep up with, for example, it's pretty straightforward to get a calculation on the percentage of males or females or minorities who are participating in an apprenticeship, because they're going to check these boxes, but we would never know about the disclosure of disability. We would never know about a person's disability status if they don't disclose it. So we need to get this form filled out. Now, they don't have to submit this as part of their initial application. If they do, great. It stays with the employer. Put it in a folder. It does not become part of their personnel record. It does not become part of their apprenticeship training record. Put it all in a lockable folder and keep it separate. I personally do not have the right to say, hey, show me the disclosure statement, the disability disclosure statement for apprentice John Brown. Nobody has the right to see that except the employer who has collected it, and the outcome of it has to be transmitted to the sponsor. Now, if you want to actually hand that document or maybe even mail that document to UWA so they can put it into that student's record or that apprentice's record, that's a process that UWA and you can work out. Typically best case scenario is just house it at the employer and communicate the results of that document to UWA in a secure fashion. I can't reiterate that enough. People won't answer these questions about disability if they think that everybody in the world is going to know what they said, right? So we really want to give them a true opportunity to fill it out. This is what that form looks like. Very, very simple. It says, yes, I have a disability. No, I don't. Or no, I don't want to answer. Now, at the application phase right here, they don't have to fill that out. Once they become an apprentice, you as the employer can say, no, I need every single one of you to fill this out. And you're going, wait a minute, it says it's voluntary. It's voluntary if you want to answer or not. But there's three choices, yes, no, or I don't want to answer. But you as the employer can say, it's not voluntary to not fill it out. And all that does is give you at least one document one time where you can say, no, they were definitely told that they had the opportunity to disclose. That's important because like today, maybe I don't have a disability, but I get hurt or have a car wreck or something later, and now I do have a disability, or I get older and I start to lose my vision or my hearing or whatever. The status that they had on day one is not the status they will necessarily have forever. So they need to know they have the ongoing opportunity to report a disability to you so that you can keep that up in their records. All right, so page one, apprentice fills all this out, pretty basic stuff. Page two is direct cut and paste copy from the standard background check information for any other teacher license from the State Department of Ed. So local school systems, this looks like a lot. And if you are a parapro or a teacher's aide or somebody who's never had to fill this out, you may need some help understanding, like, what's this process look like? But I feel confident in saying that every employer on this call has somebody in their school system that does this on a regular basis. Please assist these applicants with this portion so they get it right. We don't want to send in partial or incomplete applications and then be having a back and forth and, oh, you're missing this. Let's get it right on the first shot so that we make sure that these folks get in and become teacher apprentices with the least amount of hassle. There is a place here for the applicant, so that is the apprentice applicant, to sign saying that they've turned all of that stuff in as true and accurate to the best of their knowledge. All right, so applicant fills out part A, then part B, it's got to go to the college. Now, this is in the university's role as the related instruction provider. Remember, they're wearing two hats. So in their role as a related instruction provider, they're going to look at the person's transcript. Essentially going to treat it just like any other transfer student coming in. If they're not already a student of the university, they're going to say, hey, this is what you need. This is what you got. There's a gap, or no, you're good to go. It is important, and this will become a drop down right here. Right now it says secondary teacher for these subjects. Now that we'll be adding elementary, this will become a drop down, and you can change the evaluation conducted for elementary or secondary teacher. Make sure sponsor, make sure that you are selecting the right one there so that we know, yeah, they're applying for this kind or that kind of apprentice program. Based on that review, which could be required, the university may say, no, we're only going to do official transcripts, right? That's what it says here. Eventually, this evaluation will have to be done in an official transcript. But there may be some unofficial process on the front end where you have, and Dr. Miller, you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, but y'all may have a, hey, let's just set up a 10-minute call and take a quick look at your unofficial and see if we are wasting our time or what.
But sure, we're happy to do that. Happy to do that.
Thank you. So I like put you on the spot like that, just, yeah, wouldn't you be glad to do that? So the findings of the review are commented here. So this is going to be, again, the university says, yep, they do have sufficient credit, and yep, they are eligible to be enrolled in our program. They could either already be enrolled in the teacher ed program or just confirm, yeah, you've got the GPA, you've got the stuff that it takes to get in. Or item C is they don't have sufficient credit, or they don't have what it takes to get in the teacher ed program. And then the only requirement there is that guidance has been made available regarding recommendations to become eligible. This was something that our employer partners at the beginning, our superintendents and principals they felt strongly about. We don't want people to just get told no. If it's no, it's no right now. What does it take to get to yes down the line? Maybe you got to go take a few other foundational classes or get your GPA up or whatever it is. And then the university is going to sign off on that, and it moves forward from there. A note here in all caps at the bottom, all applicants meeting A and B should immediately be given information about filling out their FAFSA if they haven't already done that. That needs to get started right away. The money that you are given as an employer is a last dollar scholarship. So if the person qualifies for Pell or GI Bill or an academic scholarship or anything like that, that offsets the cost of their tuition, they have to use that first. And then only if there's a bill left over, that's when the university sends the bill to the employer. Hey, Josh qualified for Pell or whatever, and this is what his remaining balance is. That's the responsibility of the employer. All right, and then item C, all right, the university has evaluated this and they've looked at the transcript and they say, yeah, this person is within the realm of possibility. This is incorrect. This would be the name of the LEA. This will go back for part C to the school system. So now we're asking, well, somebody in the school system needs to say, do I want this person to be an apprentice? Because you as the employer are the final selector of, yeah, before they ever get their application processed, yes, I want to commit because I am committing to invest in them. So this right here will say, Laney school system or whatever, contact information for Laney school system. Item 3, applicant is currently an employee in good standing, yes or no. They do have to be a current employee. I've mentioned this already. They don't have to be a parapro or teacher's aide, which was what we said a lot, but they do have to be a current employee. We're not spending state or local school system dollars on people coming in off the street. These items with an asterisk here are really just things that we're gathering because we want to know, where are these apprentice candidates coming from? Who's the pool of people that are trying to become apprentices? So are they currently doing special ed services for you? Are they currently doing Title I services? What's their current grade level responsibility? If it's not one of these, if it's, school secretary or bookkeeper or something like that, then just mark other and tell us, where it is that person is working. We talked about the journey worker qualifications before, but here's a statement that spells it out. The journey worker does have to meet the requirements that are spelled out in the administrative code in section blah, blah, blah. But all that section of the administrative code does is define what it takes to supervise interns. So we didn't want to create any confusion about who could be a journey worker. Same minimum requirements, whether it's a journey worker or a regular teacher mentor supervising interns. In number 9, we ask, has the school system, has the LEA identified a teacher with the qualifications to serve? It would be terrible for us to get good qualified applicants who say, yeah, I want to be a high school math teacher, or yeah, I want to be an elementary teacher or whatever, only to then find out there's nobody qualified to supervise that person, or they're all tied up, or they weren't willing to do it. So you've got to actually go and talk to a journey worker and say, hey, Meredith Smith, our teacher's aide down the hall, wants to become a high school science teacher. you're qualified as a journey worker. Would you be willing to do that? If they say yes, then you put their name and their certificate number right here. We got real specific there because we didn't want people just automatically checking yes. Really do this evaluation. Item 11 says payment has been made for the application. That is the application to become a teacher apprentice. There's no fee for applying to be an apprentice. This is the fee that goes to the State Department of Ed. As I understand it, it is $38. And you guys, you employers know how to pay that. It's the same process spelled out here. It's got the link for the transaction. If you want to do it online, check your money order, all the details for how to make that payment are right there. And then item 12 is the signature of the superintendent or their authorized designee. All right, so we've gone through, just to recap, 3 phases. Apprentice does part 1 or part A. They fill out all that basic information. They, probably with some help from somebody in the school system, do the part for the background check. Then it goes from them to the university. University evaluates their transcript, says, yep, you've got good credit, you've got easy access, you can get into our teacher prep program, or you're already in, or whatever. Then it goes from the university to the employer. Somebody at the employer at the local school system office says, yes, they work for me. Yes, I want them to be a teacher apprentice. I'm down for it. I'm going to pay their $38 application fee to the State Department, and I'm going to hook them up with my best teacher in the building so they can become an apprentice. All of that gets done and goes back to the university. Now it's going back to the university in their sponsor hat. So it's going apprentice to university to employer to university. All right, don't get lost in the chain there. University will review it, make sure they got everything that they need, make sure that the fee has been paid to the State Department. They'll submit to the State Department and say, yeah, we got somebody that qualifies. We want to get them a teacher apprentice license. That application will already this contains everything that the State Department needs. We're making sure of that so that it all goes in one big document, so that the person can get their teacher apprentice license. State Department blesses it, university blesses it, everybody's happy with it. This person now becomes a teacher apprentice when they are registered. So I'm going to show you this document here. We said earlier that there was a document that the apprentice signs. It's called the Form 671. This is it. This is the apprenticeship agreement. Now you see a lot of this is exactly the same stuff that we were collecting on the application. That's because the reason we asked for it on the application is because it's required for the sponsor to put the apprentice into the database. The database is called Rapids. So once this apprentice has been approved by the State Department, everybody's happy with it, the sponsor will add this person to the database based on what's in their application. They fill out all this information. It's standard. The apprentice will be, this shows the wage schedule, et cetera, et cetera. Then here's the workflow. Sponsor puts it into the database. They say, I've got a new apprentice. It comes to my office. Somebody in my office reviews it, makes sure it's a complete application. We approve it. When we approve it, our signature gets typed. Our information gets auto-generated into this box where it says signature of registration agency. Then it will be, the sponsor will be notified that we've approved it. They can print it, or the employer can print it, and these 3 have to sign it: the apprentice, the sponsor, and the employer. And then it becomes part of the apprentice's record. The only handwritten thing on this entire form is going to be these 3 signatures. Well, and those dates, I guess. These signatures and dates. If anything else up here is handwritten, that means somebody has downloaded the PDF and manually filled it out. All of this should be auto-generated by the sponsor directly out of the database when the apprentice has been added to the Rapids database. So just a big, easy flag for you to look for. If somebody sends you one of these and it's got handwriting on it, no. The only thing that should be handwritten is right here, these 3 signatures. Not even our signature is handwritten because it's auto-generated. All right, and then once again, if they didn't already do this disclosure of disability, you definitely, as an employer, make them fill one of these out and put that thing on record, okay? If you did already fill it out, they still have the opportunity to redo it now. They can do that at any time. Any apprentice can change their answer to this at any time. They just need to fill out the form and submit it to you. All right, that's a lot of documents. Let's jump back in here. So where do we go from there? Oh, wrong page. what do we need to do now? Well, we need to start advertising, right? So let's assume that we've done our employer acceptance agreements. If you haven't, that's okay. There's still time, but you need to get with Dr. Miller and get those employer acceptance agreements filled out, and then we'll get you the form to pre-qualify for the funding. Now we're all the way over to the part where now we're ready to start getting some people. You're going to create maybe a flyer, or you're going to advertise to people out in the school system. Any printed materials or websites that you do related to this need to include the specific non-discrimination agreement that goes with the apprenticeship. So just make sure that you've got that. It's in the standards, which is on the landing page. I'll show you. It's also in the poster that we'll show you in just a second. There's plenty of places to get it. If you can't find it, just ask for it, but make sure that language is in there and it is distinct from your other typical non-discrimination statements. Speaking of posters, one of the responsibilities of the employer is to display these posters prominently in a place where the apprentices can see them. That means if you stick it up on the wall in the secondary curriculum coordinator's office down at the central office, that doesn't work. You need to put it at the school where the apprentice is located. Stick it on the bulletin board or whatever in the break room, however you want to do it. This gives the apprentice information about how to file a discrimination complaint. It's got the contact information for the DOL, and it's got the contact information for my office. Some people start worrying about that they're going to have people going outside the chain of command, and I can't say it enough. We always counsel people to follow the chain of command, but they do have the right. What if the chain of command is the problem? They've got the right to come to us with an EEO complaint. Another responsibility of the employer that I want to reiterate is the anti-harassment training. Probably every school system already does this as a standard operating procedure. You don't have to do a new one or a different one. You've just got to be able to assure your sponsor, UWA, that it is getting done. Now, whether that looks like a sign-in sheet or just an agenda that says at Institute this year, every single teacher did, that's fine. But you've got to make sure that everybody working with the apprentices has had anti-harassment training. It also must communicate that the harassing conduct will not be tolerated, and it's got to be interactive in some way. So saying that it's on page 12 of the employee handbook, that's not training, that's a policy, which is fine, but you got to do some kind of a training. We will also conduct, I mentioned we'll do journey worker onboarding, but we will also conduct apprentice onboarding. That will obviously be after the apprentices are accepted and have enrolled in the program or have been registered in the program. We'll go over their rights, responsibilities, and a lot of that at that point will be, very specific to the university that they're working with. A lot of that will come from the sponsor. Hey, this is when we plan to do our check-in meetings. This is when we plan to evaluate your competencies. Here's what we need you to be keeping up with. The employer is going to say the same stuff. Keep up with your OJL in this way and your RTI, et cetera, et cetera. There are requirements for apprentice reviews. This is, again, a joint responsibility of the sponsor and the employer. You guys do this as employers, as educators now. I mean, you give students progress reports, and then you give them report cards, and then they eventually get a semester grade, right? So this is not a foreign concept to you. This needs to be an interactive process between the employer and the sponsor, and in big bold letters here, the apprentice. The apprentice needs to be given the opportunity to provide feedback. This is important in every apprenticeship program, but critically important since this is a pilot. We need to hear from the people who are going through it, who can tell us this is unmanageable, or man, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, or a combination of the two, whatever it is. We need to get that feedback, and you can only adjust to information that you receive. So make sure that you're conducting those reviews. My office doesn't stipulate how often they have to happen. The law says they have to be done, quote, periodically, but you define the period. So as an employer and a sponsor together, y'all work it out, whatever makes sense for you, every month, every 6 weeks, whatever makes sense, so that we can keep track of our apprentices and make sure that they're being successful. One of the ways we're going to keep track of the apprentices is a software that I mentioned before called WorkHands. This software is at no cost to the employers or the sponsors. It is very cool and very easy to use. We will load into this app the work process with all the list of competencies and with all the courses that have to be done. And the apprentice will have it on their phone. So it's their responsibility to go, hey, this week I worked on this competency and this competency and this competency. And I submit that report. And when I submit it, it goes to my designated journey worker who looks at that and goes, well, yeah, you worked on those. And you were probably demonstrating fundamentals in this one and this one, but that third one you got to keep working on. So I'm not checking you off on that yet. This greatly simplifies keeping up with the on-the-job learning part, as opposed to doing it in a notebook or a paper and pen or something like that. And the other advantage here is your courses will also be in there, so you can see exactly the apprentice knows what courses they're supposed to do. And there's a nice, very graphic display of their progress. So it helps people to see, hey, I'm 65% done with my competencies and I'm 70% done with my coursework. And so that keeps people motivated if they know exactly where they are. So just real quick recap, next steps for employers: advertise for your potential apprentices, go beat the bushes, find them, assist those candidates in submitting the application, prepare an onboarding for those apprentices. That'll be done in coordination with me. You don't have to do that right now and you don't have to do it by yourself, but they got to be given the opportunity to look at all these documents and know what they're signing up for. Go ahead and start selecting your journey workers. Again, there'll be an onboarding for journey workers. We'll coordinate that for you, but we'll need your help making sure they get there. And then in the ongoing, you'll monitor those apprentices like we were talking about and coordinate with the sponsor. So those are the responsibilities of the employer in a registered apprenticeship program. I'm going to stop sharing my screen at this point and see if we have any questions, or Jan or Meredith or anybody. Did I forget anything?
Very, very well done, Josh. I can't think of anything. Meredith may. I'm so glad Gail and Julie were able to join with us today.
Yeah, great job, Josh. Everything that occurred to me and popped in my mind, you eventually covered it. So yeah, very good job.
Well, if you talk for an hour and a half, you can cover most everything.
Well, you did it.
Gail or Julie, you guys get everything you needed out of
that? Yes, I'm good.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, we will. I failed to show you the landing page. I'm sure you guys have seen that, but we will post this recording to the landing page. There we go. We'll post this right up here among these resources. We will also be adding the new work process for the elementary program. Will go right there. Oh, there we go. And all the resources will be here. If you are out beating the bushes looking for apprentices, send them to this page first. And then as we complete your employer acceptance agreements and all, you'll be added here, and that point of contact goes here. This is why we didn't want the superintendent. You know, we want somebody who can actually catch and answer those questions, like Gail and you guys that'll be the ones really dealing with it. This will also be updated with the list of occupations to add elementary. So everybody should be able to go there and find the majority of what they need. But if they don't find what they need and they got any questions, our contact information is easy to find. I also strongly recommend that every potential apprentice, candidate, journey worker, anybody, go here and fill out this little form so that they go onto our mailing list. When I update these pages, when these recordings are posted, I'll send out a little note to that mailing list. Hey, new information has been posted at the teacher apprenticeship landing page. Go here to check it out. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's time. It looks like we got close to getting our right time today.
Yes.
So let me know if we can do anything else for you, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much, Josh. Thanks, Gail and Julie and Meredith.
Thank y'all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a great day.